Today, we are going to talk about turning your pain into power and becoming unstoppable. Our first guest is Tami Fitzpatrick. She is the founder and CEO of Entropy Technology Design. Entropy is a Florida-certified woman-owned small business, startup, and government contractor that developed the Nimbus threat technology. Their smart sensors and software platform create new and untapped data fields to provide advanced warning and protection against severe weather, lightning, and pre-tornado conditions, as well as man-made threats such as invasive drones, infrastructure mapping, and other security and public safety threats. She is also the visionary founder of Accelerated Consciousness, which she founded to bridge the gap between science and humanity for biofield mapping. Ms. Fitzpatrick's professional background includes 25 years in small corporate management, international trade, advanced technology development, product conceptualization, and global business. She has served on the state and local advisory board, been featured in local and national media as a leader to watch. Her background story is so intense, fascinating, astonishing. You surely will feel like you are in a movie. Tami, how are you doing today?
Thank you so much, Michelle. It's such a pleasure to be here, really. Thank you.
Such a pleasure to have you here. I am so glad that you are here. And, as I said, when we talked earlier, this is all about turning your pain into power and becoming unstoppable. Your story is like something of a movie script. So why don't you let our viewers in and let them know a little bit more about your story, a little background, and how you have become this unstoppable force today.
Well, as I was listening to you read my bio, I thought, gosh, I'm doing really great. And I am. But I think you and I were talking earlier, you see people that are really successful and you're like, wow, they've always been that way. No, I think everyone has a story. Everyone's been through some kind of struggle, and being able to be real about it and vulnerable and explain that, I think it is something that can help others as they go along their own path. And that certainly is my agenda. My background, I'm from Iowa originally, grew up on a little 10-acre farm, not farm, we had horses, great childhood. Managed to move my way to Florida, and I was in Florida in the late 80s when I had started my own advertising agency. I was in radio and television. I was very creative. I did a lot of writing, production, both on camera, behind the camera, also, placing media back in the day where we had cable and newspapers, that people still read newspapers. But so I was very successful at that point, and I was in my, mid-20s, I think, at that time. So about that time, a young man entered into my life. He was actually a very handsome, charismatic foreign man, and turned out he was from Lebanon. He had seen me on television and had hoped to meet me, and we ended up meeting. And not long after that, I was very much in love with him, and he asked me if I wanted to go back to his country and we would live there. And I remember at that time, my parents, had met him, and they kind of vetted him as much as they could. And his father flew over, and we got to meet him as well. Fast forward, I went back to Lebanon, gave up family, career, life, and to take on a life of a princess. Really was kind of how it was portrayed to me, that they had resort hotels, they had a lot of money, there was live-in maids and a driver and chef and all these things that, when you're at that age, you think, oh my gosh, this is perfect. And on top of it all, I was very in love with him. So it seemed like a perfect mix. So I went there. It was a third world country. And so life was definitely not quite as easy as we consider it here in the States. And we got married, we're humming along. I was pregnant with my son, delivered my son here, started to realize things were not quite as they were proposed to me or projected to me. But I was still very in love and probably having culture shock going into the scenario. So after my son was born, went back over, about 6 months went by, and I really had started to realize things were not the wealth that was given to me or told to me that was going to the lifestyle was actually not really happening. And so I was very confused and kind of secluded, hadn't met anyone else. He didn't have introduced me to any Americans, didn't take me to the embassy to register me, anything like that. And I told him I really thought maybe we should move back to the States. I don't, and if that, I'm not sure that this is working out. And he made a rather threatening statement to me. He just looked at me and he said, well, you wouldn't live to tell about it. And when he said that, I was quite shocked. And as soon as he said it, he looked away and I said, what did you say? And he denied ever saying it. And he would still deny that to this day. This statement in itself was very strong because it established kind of a mode for me. And then from that point forward, I literally lost my identity. I'm in a third world country. I'm not with other Americans. I'm trying desperately for his family to love me. That was most of my effort every day, was just trying to do things to make them love me and accept me. And they really didn't, but that's kind of common in those environments. And so it was just a very difficult situation to live through. As I said, I lost my identity and I ended up ironically having 2 more children. Didn't tell my family what was going on. Each child I would come by myself, maybe with one child, I would deliver the child here and go back over. Still really didn't tell anyone. I couldn't manage to tell anyone that I had made such a mistake and how unhappy I was. And again, the environment there was very secluded. And it was dreadful, to be honest with you. It was so heartbreaking and to go through something like that. And so 10 full years went by where I can honestly say that every single day of my life, I was in pain, literally. I was lost, I was secluded. I did not know, how I was going to get through this. But here was the sad part. On the outside, looking in, everyone thought everything was great. We were a happy couple, life was wonderful. We had all this wealth and we did all these things, and it was a facade. And he taught me that's how you do that. That's what you need to do. And so I totally bought into it. So those looking in thought life was great. Inside, I was crumbling. I was desperately unhappy. 10 years went by, and I got to the point where I really didn't want to go on anymore. I had these 3 beautiful kids, but I was so miserable and I didn't think there was an end for me. And one day I decided I thought I would try and go to sleep and never wake up. And so I took some Tylenol PM and NyQuil, and I went to sleep, only to be woke up as he was propping me up at the table with the kids for dinner. And I remember, kind of this, and I looked across the table and my son was there and he was looking at me kind of odd. And I just remember thinking, this is kind of floaty. The next thing I remember was the next day. The next morning I woke up alone in bed, kids were off to school, nothing was said, nothing was done. And that's when I realized that if I didn't do something to get myself out of this situation, I could die and no one would know. And so at that point, I believe that, you talk about miracles that happen in your life. Within 3 months, because I had really hit rock bottom. And then I said, pull up that energy inside because you have got to fight back. You've got to survive. I literally within 3 months managed to get myself contracted by the State Department at our US Embassy. I started because I knew that I couldn't just get out. I couldn't just leave. I couldn't do those things because he could block me to leave the country. And so it was this slow process of me figuring out how I could actually get back home. So what turned into an absolutely phenomenal experience working at for the State Department at the embassy. I went from rock bottom to skyrocket, because if you're a US citizen working at the US Embassy in a third world country like this, everything that they do, kind of walk on air. So all of a sudden I had all this respect where I had no respect before. I was ignored. Suddenly I was important. People wanted visas, and it was a very interesting dynamic, but it literally shifted me back into who Tami was. And I regained my power and realized, okay, I can do this. Now, the next 5 years then was a slow exit. I tried to divorce him in the country. He wouldn't let that happen. He was unfaithful. He was, there was all these things going on. Like I said, I'll divorce you here in the country. I'll live up by the embassy so you can see your kids. Is that it? None of that was acceptable. So this became just a very empty marriage, and it was very heartbreaking because still in many ways I was very much in love with him. But I again, lost my identity at longer before that, and was trying still to figure out how I could get out of the country. So here's the interesting part where things start to sound like a movie. 2006, war broke out between Israel and Hezbollah. And at that point, an evacuation started to take place. So at the embassy, part of what I was doing was helping with that evacuation. We had 10,000 US citizens. They were looking to leave the country. So we had to try and help them evacuate. Ironically, just prior to that, and again, you wonder how you get those messages. I had literally set things in motion so that I could leave. I had opened an account in the States because I had done some TDY, some training in the States, again, just by myself. The kids were still there. So I couldn't take the kids and not come back. So I had started to set things up. And so when the war broke out, I gave my notice to them and I said, I want to be on the last chopper out of here. So it was all kinds of chaos. And I want to share a little bit about that first too, because people are so fascinated by what took place there. War broke out. We were trying to evacuate our US citizens. As I said, we had 10,000 of them. Initially, it started with, we're going to have a very orderly evacuation. We will take you out of the ports. And Israel bombed both exits of the country, bombed the airport. So that was shot through. And so it became very chaotic. Communication broke down. Our US citizens had no idea what they were, how they were supposed to get out. I was literally the only US citizen that worked inside the embassy that lived outside. So of course I was kind of a liaison. Everybody knew Tami and they were like, phones were ringing off the wall. Tami, how do we get out of here? What do we do? I wasn't the sole person doing this, but it became so chaotic. Citizens had no idea what to do. It was very fascinating because I was able from the inside to watch how somewhat coordinated things are when war takes place. I watched our military, or at least I overheard how the military would kind of shut things down. They would communicate out to Israel when they needed to bring a chopper in so that we could evacuate US citizens. So things would ironically stop bombing at that time. And then we'd load up our choppers with US citizens, take them out, and bombing would start again. So what we were doing, we had evacuation inside the embassy there with choppers. And then we had, at this point, communication, as I said, broke down. And we just started telling our citizens, just head to the ports. There are cargo ships. There are cruise ships. Get in and go. It was complete chaos. It was really unfortunate. So at that point, again, I had asked the ambassador, could I please be on the last chopper out of here? And I knew that this was my chance to really be able to go home. So it was very exciting to me. I took my severance pay that they gave me. I told my then husband, I said, look, I'm leaving. Kids are coming with me. You come, you stay, you go, whatever you want to do. And of course, he said, I'm coming with you. So we had the kids. We had one suitcase each. That was it. And I'll never forget the day that I went to the back of the chopper, just like the ones you see in the movies, with the guys at the back in there with the big guns, and we're loaded inside and we're sitting down, and my kids are with me. And I thought, my God, I'm finally getting out of here, because for so many years I thought I would die there, that I would never, ever see home again. So we evacuated there in that chopper, and that was an amazing situation in itself. Just the way that we evacuated so many of our citizens, but we also evacuated the wives of Hezbollah and their sons and brought them back into the country. And there was a lot of chaos going on. Obviously, there were terrorist activity, but I won't go too deep into that, but it's a very interesting scenario that we were also evacuating people that were later part of terrorist activity in the United States here. So again, we won't go deep into that, but that's a book hopefully come out with someday. So 3 months later, I had filed for divorce, and that's when life started over again for me here. So if you want me to pause, I don't know.
That's amazing.
Going with it.
Wow. That's fascinating. I know that the listeners are probably like, what? So I have to ask this. You say chaotic, but were there bullets flying? Did you see things getting blown up? I mean, were you like right in the middle of all of it?
So Beirut was where a lot of the chaos was going. There were bombs, there were choppers flying around. You could see, were there bullets flying? No. But there were certainly a lot of, you could hear the bombs. The country itself is quite small. It's like 250 miles wide by 90 miles. So it's a small country. And it's of course on the Mediterranean, and then you have the mountains behind you. But that was kind of a normal lifestyle of the entire time I was there. There was always some kind of chaos in Beirut that you hear about. There was a bombing or an assassination or these kind of things. So you become not numb to it, but you kind of take it in stride after a while. And the people that I want to pause just a moment and say something about the people, because I don't want it to ever sound as though I am bashing the Lebanese culture. They're actually an amazing culture. There are so many mixes. There is Muslim and Christian, and of course there are Hezbollah and a lot of other factors there. There's obviously also from Syria in there now, but they are some of the most hospitable people and some of my favorite people. So I do not want this to come across at all as though it's the people. It was my situation with my husband and his family. And unfortunately, it was exclusive to that. Everyone else was quite kind to me. So I do want to tell another quick story though about something at the embassy that happened. It was so fascinating. So I'm in the embassy and I'm trying to help with the evacuation. And our American Citizens Department got a hold of me and they said, Tami, we need you to go down to Charlie Post to the lower gate and bring in an American that's down there. And so I went on down and mind you, there was so much chaos. There was tons of people all around the embassy and they were, upset. It's like, get us out of here. What are you doing? So they gave me the name of this woman. And of course there's a big crowd. And I asked for some help from the guys that were down there. And you have to remember the embassy is surrounded. It's you can't get in or out without going through metal detectors. And it's literally armed guards around it and barbed wire. And also it's a exclusive, secluded embassy. So they called out this woman's name, and a couple of minutes later, slowly through the crowd came this woman who was in the burqa, fully covered. All you could see were her eyes and in her arms. She's got a brand new little baby, about 6 months old, and then she's got I think it was a little boy who was probably 2 years old. Mm-hmm. And so, mind you, this woman was the wife of one of the Hezbollah, and so I bring her up. And I bring her up into my office because that was part of where the evacuation process to get in the choppers was taking place. And I put her in my office and she was sitting there. And mind you, I hadn't seen her. I could just see some blue eyes. And a couple minutes later, I hear her talking to her husband and she's speaking Arabic to him and Habibi, and I'm okay and all this kind of thing. And then we started to talk and I found out she was probably a 23-year-old blonde-haired, blue-eyed American who had completely, I don't want to say lost her identity, but very similar. So she was telling me, and I have to be careful when I say those things, lost her identity. You could tell she was terrified. You could tell she had completely embraced the culture. And she certainly didn't come across like a 23-year-old American girl. That's what I mean by that. She had told me that for the last week, they had been trapped in Beirut, underground, that the only way she could get milk for her baby to make the formula was taking it from a pool that had been half cracked. There was a swimming pool that she was literally taking water from and trying to boil it to have milk for her baby. They've been underground like that. So, here she was evacuating. Her husband was, saying, you have to get my wife out because she's a US citizen. And again, as I said, we were evacuating everyone. But that was just another story of so many stories like that I experienced when I was there. So I went totally different direction. Where do you want me to go right now?
Wow, that's amazing. It really is. It's like a movie script. I swear, it's fascinating. Yeah. So now you're in the United States. You got your husband and your 3 kids, 1 suitcase each. What's the next step?
To immediately file for divorce. We did go once to counseling. And we were there one time and the woman said, you have Stockholm syndrome. And so obviously she quickly understood that there was no hope for the marriage. And she said, I need to see you because you obviously have a lot of PTSD, you have a lot of trauma. And so I did file for divorce and he continued to kind of come back and forth. And I literally had 2 weeks before I could get the kids into school. So we hit the ground. Had to get an apartment and furniture and clothes for the kids and get them into school and try and keep them stable while all this other stuff is going on. So I divorced him, no child support, no alimony, 18 years of marriage with nothing to show for it other than my 3 beautiful kids. So I was very much on my own. I came over with my severance pay from the State Department. He did not contribute anything whatsoever financially to that. And he went back. And so for the next 5 years, I was 100% responsible for the kids, all three of them financially. And I started with my a company that I had before this one, where we were selling lightning detectors. I'll tell them more about the technology you heard a little bit about, but so I want to say too, I think I had just as much culture shock coming back home as I did going out. So it was this reacclimation to life over here, and you just feel out of sorts. It's a very unstabling sensation that you have all the time. And then of course, divorcing and all of the things that you go through. So it was definitely a struggle. And something that I did that helped me through it the entire first year that we were back, every single day I did what's called morning pages. And if anyone's ever gone through trauma, I think you might understand it. I would sit down and I would write 3 full pages. I would just write. I didn't care to read it again. I didn't care about grammar. I just let the emotions pour. And there were so many emotions, so much heartache, so much disappointment. I just let those pour onto the papers. And I think that helped me quite a bit as well. So that was part of the transition. That was part of, getting my sea legs back, if you will, understanding who Tami was again. And it took a little while, but again, I needed to take care of my children. And so I was very motivated to work hard and do that for them.
See that grit, right? That's where it comes from. You take that pain and you're like, you know what? I don't have time for pain. I got to make something happen. I got to get this, this is where it's at. We got to get it to work, and everything happens for a reason, obviously. So your next step was you started this company, the first one you founded.
Yeah. The first one, go ahead. What?
The first one was lightning detection.
Yeah, it was Thunderbolt International. Yeah, I had actually met a physicist who was the inventor of this, and it was a fabulous product. Talk about really, you go down your path, you go down a course that you don't think you're going to do. I would have never thought I was going to sell lightning detectors, but it seemed to be the right thing to do. So he was the inventor of this. I started selling those, ended up selling with that company I founded. I was the CEO of that. We did the manufacturing and global sales with that. Ended up selling about $3 million worth of those globally, and that hummed along very nicely. That was when I encountered my first little hiccup. That company, I had one investor who didn't really understand we were trying to expand on the technology and the IP, and didn't want us to do that. Also, I learned later, unfortunately, that we didn't have full ownership of the IP, which was not disclosed to me initially. So that company, we were kind of starved out of that, which was fine. Walked away. They wanted us to do a non-compete, non-disclosure. We didn't sign any of that. And that was the first very, very difficult time. I want to share something on that too, of more traumas that you go through. The day that I knew that that company was going down and I wasn't going to have income, mind you, I had been supporting all 3 children for 5 years. My ex was in town, and I called him to come to the house, and I had the kids there, and I said, I need to have a family meeting. I'm about to lose this company. I will not have an income. And, I'm going to need you to start to step up and help out. And he listened, and he left. And the next day, my daughter drove up in a brand new BMW, and she was a senior in high school. And there was no help for me. I was ignored. Again, punishment for, of course, divorcing. And that was a very, very painful time for me, because I literally had nothing. I sold furniture, had to move us into a smaller place, trying to pay rent. I sold my car. I sold everything that I had, just trying to stay ahead of things. And all while it was, certainly capable of helping out, but didn't, again, as punishment. And the next step of that, not sure if I really want to go into it, because it relates to my daughter and it's a very sensitive subject, but let's just say that instead of giving financial support to me, who is the mother, he gave it to my daughter and put her in charge, basically, of here's money to pay the rent until your mom gets on her feet. Here's money to pay bills. And that created a very unfortunate dynamic, as you can imagine, between a mother and a daughter. So that was very difficult. Yeah. And so if you want me to keep going, a year went by.
That sounds like he was still making sure that he had his thumb on you. Like, I mean, you were still going to have to take orders no matter what. And then he wanted to make sure. Yeah, he wanted to make sure that he could punish you further. And it's just so sad that you had to go through so much. But I really want to get into the good part, because what you've gone through is what has set you up for the success you have today.
Yes.
And I really am fascinated by that. So
Yes.
now that you've left that company,
Mhm.
and you're going to, you're dealing with the fact that now your daughter is your money source,
Right.
and you have to ask her if you can pay rent or anything else, which
Right.
does not sound like that would be the most fun experience.
No, it wasn't.
And, and then
But it wasn't her fault.
what-
She was a child. She didn't
she
understand.
was very young.
Yeah.
So now, what's the next step for Tami?
So that went on for approximately a year. I was trying to figure out, what am I doing? What do I want to do? I applied for different jobs. Nothing really felt right. And then I had a conversation with the inventor, the physicist, and I said, look, should we try and get back in this ring again and actually do this technology? Because the technology itself is incredibly fascinating. That's when I decided to found Entropy, the company that I have now. So that was fascinating in itself. Do you want to hear a little of the technology, or where do you want me to share about that?
Share what's on your heart. Tell people about the technology. Tell the listeners about the
technology. So here's another piece too, and this is probably to help women who have been in my situation, where you're a female CEO and you have other situations that happen with board members or other challenges. So the next significant challenge that I originally founded the company, and I brought in some small investors. They were men. They invested. They also wanted board positions and employment contracts. And so that is literally how we funded the company and got it started. We got almost all the way there to develop the prototype that we were working on for these weather detection. And at some point, these men decided that they wanted to try and kind of elbow me out. It became, I was bullied. I was harassed. It was a very, very difficult time. They would say, we're not going to bring any other money in until you either exit or, someone else is put in charge. It became a very, very stressful scenario. And that was another time where I hit bottom and bounced up, because I was literally ready to sign, okay, I'll turn the company over. Obviously, I'm not the right one for this. I was believing what was being said. And my attorney called me and he said, Tami, you don't need to do this. You are 51% owner of this company. And I realized, why am I allowing this to happen? So I called a board meeting, called everyone to join in, all shareholders. And I literally said, we're going to vote these 4 individuals off the board. All in favor. We took the poll. I had 82% of the stock. They were voted off the board. And then I turned around and terminated all of them for cause, because certainly there was cause. Amazing what you can do when you realize the power that you have. And women often are too vulnerable. They allow these things to happen. And you really need to take stock in yourself and fight back when you have to in these scenarios. Sometimes, as I said, here I was 51% owner. I had every right and ability to do this all along. But of course, I was being intimidated and bullied, and I didn't see that until I, hit bottom and bounced back up again. So that company is still the one I have now. It is humming along beautifully. Let me tell a little bit about the technology, because it's so fascinating. We have small sensors, about small enough to fit in the palm of your hand. And we have other size sensors as well, but these sensors are so powerful, they can see a 600-mile radius. They can detect up to 50 storms, squall lines, tornadoes, lightning, and give the user advanced warning. So that was what the purpose of the company was initially. It was to do the weather detection technology. We kind of stopped. We didn't fully get that developed because we looked at the data and we realized we're picking up a lot of other things. We're picking up other anomalies like drones, malicious drones. Well, wouldn't that be great if we could pick up a drone before it is able to fly over and drop a bomb, or just fly into something and explode? So we actually submitted white papers to the government, and we were awarded a contract to develop, do the R&D for this technology. So the technology, and that was a couple of years ago. So they have invested several million into us right now, and we are humming along. We have what's called passive detection of drones. So you literally would not see us there. We are able to see the drones before they see us, and we know that they're there. And the next phase of this will be what's called non-kinetic disablement, where we're going to develop a type of technology where we can, and I won't give away the secret sauce, but we can basically knock them out of the sky without blowing them up. So it's very exciting technology. There's nothing quite like it on the planet, to our knowledge, and we're given that information from the government as well. So it's a very exciting time. We've worked very, very hard, and it shows that, perseverance, sticking with things, despite, all the things that I had been through, and I've remained at the helm this entire time. And it's very exciting where we're at today.
That's amazing. So I also know that you're able to pick up tunneling. Is that correct?
Yeah. Anything that gives off, there's anything that gives off an emission. It's VLF, very low frequency magnetic field detection. So we're looking at a frequency, or we're listening in a frequency that really no one is. And there's a lot of activity that goes on there. And our technology is so smart because we have AI in there as well, artificial intelligence. And so we're analyzing the environment at all times. We're basically cataloging everything from phones to motors of cars to anything you see. Once you have done that and you've established what everything is, then you can begin to target and understand what this is. Something underground, we can establish there's some movement, there's electrical movement of some kind, or there's drilling or this or that. We can pick up on that just the same as the motors that are on a drone. So mortar fire as well. If it's giving off any kind of emission, we can detect it. And again, this is very unusual technology. No one has quite figured out how to do this better than us. I'm sure someone will figure it out at some point, but we're the first to do this. So again, it's very exciting. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
You're taking the defense contracting world by storm. It's amazing. I'm so happy for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I also hear that you are working on accelerated consciousness. You're taking that, is it the same kind of sensor mapping for?
It's this is kind of my baby. This is the thing that I love. You'll see me kind of light up when we talk about this. I'm also a very spiritual person. I know religious spirituality, it's all combined for me. And I was watching a show on Gaia one day. Ben Stewart has a show on there, and he was interviewing a University of California professor, and they were talking about basically how the mind, your emotions give off an energy. And we understand when your emotions you're upset, you can affect your body. You can make yourself sick. And there's been no real tangible evidence of that. And the professor was actually saying, if someone could come up with a technology that could read that, actually prove that your emotions are giving off energy that is affecting the health of the body, wow, wouldn't they be great? So what did I do? I turned to my physicist and I said, I have a challenge for you. And I call myself, I'm kind of woo-woo sometime. I like to meditate, and of course I pray and all of that, but I'm very much, I'm an intuitive, I'm empathic. And so I love those kind of things. And I believe there are other energies and all of that. So I went to him, who is a physicist, and he's like, no, if it's not quantum physics, it's nothing. And 1 + 1 = 2. And I said, I challenge you to come up with that. Several hundred hours later of intense research, he came up with a theory, taking our sensors. So the sensors we have with entropy, we will actually use some of those, and we will redevelop them, shrink them down. And we've been working for the last year now with a solid theory of being able to put these sensors around the human body to be able to detect these emissions that are coming off from the energy of your emotions. Because what happens when you get emotional, your nervous system fires off. Okay, so there's additional stuff. I won't get too technical into it, but there are things that happen to the body that actually give off those energies that we can pick up. And once we're able to begin doing that, there's all kinds of things that we can do. So it's a biofield mapping. You can then do a lot of other things to help treat the human, human health, human consciousness. We've also found a way that we could possibly increase the brain power by about 4%. I'm getting way ahead, but this is very exciting. So we are working with the University of California, Dr. Paul Mills, and it's very exciting what we're doing with this right now. So we're starting, we've just published an article, or it's about to get published, So we're going to get some movement with that. But that's exciting to me. That's just another thing very unusual that can absolutely impact humans and help us in many ways. So entropy is helping with threat detection, helping to save lives, help with liability and productivity for businesses. And accelerated consciousness is more focused on the human and the body and helping in a healthy way that way.
That's fascinating.
Fun stuff.
I'm an empath also, so
Yeah.
it's kind of it's such a unique way of looking at things, because I was like, wait, how is that gonna happen? What?
Yeah.
But everything's energy, right? So if you could map that energy, you would know what it's doing to the other people around you. That's what's going to be cool. That I think will be fascinating. If you're in a room and you can map the energy and you can see how a person can light up a room.
Mm-hmm.
If you could physically see that light up, that would be amazing. I'm very fascinated by this.
It is. It's fascinating. And science has been, so separated from medicine, and they weren't able to merge together. And so, and then of course you have the spiritual side of it. It's like, what are you talking about? You're giving this off. But I'm hoping to merge these two so that when you have actual tangible proof of this to the scientific community, then you can bridge these two and start to do some really significant things. And people will shift over and start to realize, okay, it's odd that we pay so much attention to the physical body, but we don't pay any attention to the mind. And the mind is so powerful, and the mind has so much happening with it that is so much more, there's a lot more going on there than we really give our minds credit for, and the power that our minds have.
They say we only use less than 10% of our brain. So if you can give us 4 more percent, oh man, we're going to have some geniuses walking around here. Superhumans.
Superhumans, you never know.
Yeah.
And also to help with ailments of the body. If you can detect someone, their heart, is already having issues. So there's a lot of different things, and there's treatments that are involved. So if you get a chance to go to Accelerated Consciousness, it's accelerated-consciousness.com. You can learn a little bit more about it there. So.
Okay, now on to the next question I have for you. And that is, you've now owned 3, 4, possibly 5 different businesses. What is one of the biggest things you could tell our listeners that you went through, like as far as owning a business? What was one of the biggest obstacles that you had to face with that they might be able to,
as a woman or in general?
As a business owner.
As a business owner. It's COVID has really impacted things so significantly, and it's created people, or put people in a scenario where they're home, they're starting their own businesses, they're doing things a little differently. I think everything has shifted quite a bit. For me, I think it's surrounding yourself with people smarter than you, and not being afraid to make mistakes, be real. I think I had an interview somewhere where, you don't have to be large and in charge all the time. If you have that instinct and you do decide you want to do something, obviously I'm not an engineer, I'm not a physicist, but I have a team of engineers and really brilliant subject matter experts all around me doing the things that I knew visually, as a visionary, I knew we could do these things. So, don't be afraid to do what your heart tells you. Let's get out there, let's do something. This is something I want to start. And there's always ways to do it. There's, you bootstrap it yourself. There's investors out there that will help. There's, venture capitalists. There's grant money that's available from the government in all kinds of categories that people don't realize. So I think it's just having that. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to give it a shot, and get your company going if you really feel it in your heart, right? If you fail, you fail, and try another thing, right? I think that sounds kind of crazy, but for example, make sure you have some kind of income, and then on the side, start something that you want to do. Don't just leap off that cliff and have no income. But yeah.
What is one of your favorite quotes?
I think my favorite one is stay classy, sassy, and a little badassy. I use that one all the time. That's probably my favorite quotes. I actually came up with one that I wrote myself, which is really funny because I have to pull it up right now because I can't remember it. But it's been one that I have really enjoyed, and I wrote it one day. Let me find it for you. Hang on a second. The rewards for working through obstacles define who we are and make the success of our persistence even sweeter. I think
That is beautiful. I love that.
That says a lot. Yeah, and that's probably my favorite.
That's beautiful. That is amazing. What is one other thing that you would like to tell our readers, our listeners about? Because I know you were talking about funding.
Yes, actually. So with government contracting, obviously we're doing quite well with that. But I do want to commercialize some of the products that we have. So I am with Entropy, we are doing a cap raise. So I'm looking for investors for that, or business partners. So we are fundraising with that. We are also fundraising with Accelerated Consciousness. So we're, if you have an interest in those kind of things, you can find my email address on both the websites. I'm not sure if you're going to publicize them, but so yeah, we're raising funds to advance the technology in both companies.
And where can they find your information?
So you could probably, best thing to do would be to go to my personal website, which is TamiFitzpatrick.com. And both websites are there. There's links to that, and then you can find me. Of course, I'm on LinkedIn and all the social medias as well, but there's a lot of information on TamiFitzpatrick.com.
Well, Tami, thank you so much for being my guest today. Your story is amazing, and I know that all of the listeners are going to be just like, more? Everything you have gone through is so unbelievable, but it happened. And it's kind of like a lot of stories I've heard, when you really get down to the grit of it and you start to look into it, all of us have to go through, you have to go through the pain to get there. Anyone who thinks that it's going to be easy hasn't done it.
Yeah.
Because it's not. Just face your fear, get over it, and turn your pain into power.
And learn how to turn that into love. I think that's another message too, is that I went through many years of bitterness, but I'm not bitter anymore. You let it go and you just see the love in everything. And that's the best, most healthy way to get through life, isn't it?
Love and light.
Yeah, love and light.
Thank you.